Well, you can have a seat. We're in week 5, can you believe it, of our series about identity. And today I have kind of an unusual message perhaps for some. And I want to talk to us about Jesus as our bridegroom king. And today we're going to talk a lot about how Jesus is our bridegroom. And then next week we'll talk more about how he's our king. When God first created Adam, what did he do? He put him to sleep, and out of his rib, he made Eve. And so to speak, the Father walked the bride down the aisle and gave him to Adam and said, "This is your bride, bone of your bone, flesh of your flesh." And that was the first Adam. And the second Adam, the same thing happened. Jesus, God, in the flesh, came to earth. Crazy thought that God became a man and he went to a cross and he too fell asleep, and out of his side came a bride. And the Father at the end of the age, at the end of the world, is going to take that bride and give it as a gift to Jesus. And do you know that you are the bride of Christ, and you are the inheritance of Jesus, just as Eve was the gift from God to Adam. So to the second Adam, Jesus, we are a gift to him. And all throughout this Bible, this Word of God, we see the story that God is like a husband to his people, and we are like a bride that he is pursuing. And one of the greatest books, I believe, for understanding God's affection towards us is the Song of Songs, the Song of Solomon. And many of the greatest men and women of God have caught a passion and have caught a love for God reading the Song of Songs. And the Song of Songs is the song of all songs. It's written by King Solomon, who is the son of King David, who wrote many of the Psalms. But this is the song of all songs. And we're going to take kind of an allegorical approach as over today and the next Sunday. Going to go through a couple chapters of the Song of Songs, and I want to show you that this is not a book about just marriage, but really it's a greater picture of Jesus's affection towards us. That the Solomon in this book points to a greater Solomon, Jesus Christ, who pursues his bride. And why is this so important? Because, my friends, we are living in the end times. And now the end times, I want to tell you, everybody says that the end times is the end times. It's been the end times since Jesus left the earth, technically. But the day is coming closer and closer. And one of the things that the Bible says is that the love of many will grow cold. And I want to tell you that God's love and our love for him is the thing that will sustain us through the darkest and hardest seasons of life. That will sustain us through many tribulations. The amazing thing about loving God is that you can love somebody very quickly. That it doesn't take you 30 years for you to fall in love with somebody, but you can fall in love with Jesus, and you can stir the fire of your passion for him very quickly. And many of you, maybe you've had that first love with God, but it's gotten cold. And I want to show us, how do we get a passion for Jesus? We study his passion for us. Are you guys following? Let's go to Song of Songs, chapter 1, verse 1. Actually, verse 2. Here's what he says. The bride says this: "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth." Like, right off the bat, I'm just going to start with this. Don't get weird on me, okay? Okay, this is not, Jesus is my boyfriend, and I'm imagining Jesus kissing me. Please, okay? Don't get weird. You can love God without it being weird and sensual. But the reason I want to bring this book is because there are phrases in this book that need to become familiar to us in our prayer life. And there's things that are in this book that need to be on the tip of our mouth. And so many of us, we are comfortable with God as our master. We're comfortable with him as our king, as our father. But we're so uncomfortable with him as the lover of our soul. And so here is one of the greatest prayers. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. What comes out of the mouth of God? It's his word. And so the prayer that we have is, God, let your word download your affections to my heart. This is her prayer. Let your word download your affections to my heart. Expand, God, expand my capacity to love you. And do you know that lovers of God work harder than workers of God? That you will go 1,000,000 times further for somebody that you love compared to somebody that you simply serve. And that's why I'm telling you why this is so important, that you become not just a servant in God's house, but a lover of him. Because you will burn out and you will not go through the dark night of the end times if you do not have a fire of God, of his love for you burning in your heart. And so she goes on to say, for your love is more delightful than wine. My little nieces, my sister and my brother-in-law have been preaching the gospel to my little nieces, and they've been considering it. And one of my little nieces, she asked, well, you can do anything in heaven, right? In hell, right? Can I watch Bluey, the cartoon, in hell? I thought that was hilarious. Isn't that us? Where we want heaven, but there is Bluey the cartoon. There's other lesser pleasures that seem good. And there's like, I want Jesus, but like, that looks fun. And I love that she says this, your love is more delightful than wine. That we think that the devil has all the good things, all the pleasurable things, but actually God created pleasure that you would delight in him. And there are even permissible pleasures. We know that there's pleasures that Christians aren't supposed to do, but there's even permissible things that are good, like roller coasters and ice cream. But even those things are nothing compared to the joy and the delight of God's love towards us. And I want to just invoke a little bit of jealousy in your heart, that you would long to experience God's love and God's pleasure. Psalm 16 says that at his right hand there are pleasures evermore. Next verse 4, she says this, "Take me away with you, let us hurry." This is the dynamic that we have with God, is he draws us away to the secret place of prayer, of being alone with him. And then number 2, let us hurry, let us run. So first, you are pulled away and you are one-on-one with God, and you let him love you and you let him pour into you. And then number 2, you hurry and you go do stuff. But often we do the reverse. First we do stuff, and then if we have time, we'll go pray. Now this is a big, important verse. Verse 5. Is this the ESV? Could you look? She says this amazing phrase. She says, "Dark am I. I'm very dark, but lovely, O daughter of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon. Do not gaze at me because I am dark, because the sun has looked upon me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me keeper of the vineyard, but my own vineyard I have not kept." And here, this kind of farmer, shepherd girl has her first crisis in the Song of Songs. And she's faced with the fact that her heart is dark, and that she's attended to other people's gardens, but the own garden of her heart she has not attended. And she is not quite as holy, she's not quite as dedicated, she is not quite as lovely as she thought. And so she says, "I am dark." Often we go through these seasons. I don't know if you've ever gone through this season where you fall into some sin and you're like, "Man, I'm dark. I'm not quite as good as I thought I was." And there's all this brokenness and there's all this stuff. And then there's this small whisper in our heart, "But I'm lovely to him." And I think that she is almost saying this uncertainly. She's almost trying to convince herself that she is worthy of this bridegroom king. And I love how she doesn't blame shit. Well, she kind of does. She's like, "They made me work in their vineyards." But here's what I want to tell us is that sometimes we can be so discouraged by our sin, by our brokenness. But we need to have, even if it's small, a revelation that God still loves us, that we are still lovely in his sight. Because this is the lie that we believe, that if we are good to God, then he's good to us. That if I'm a good boy, then God will bless me and God will love me and God will care for me. But the good news of the gospel is not that you earn something from God, but that God, while you were still a rebel and an enemy of God, Jesus Christ died for you and gave his life. God so loved the big bad world that he gave his son. And so it's nothing that you did that can make God love you more or less. You know that you are loved You cannot be loved less by God, and you cannot be loved more than you are right now, because it's not about you. It's about what Jesus has done for you. She says, don't look at me. This is what happens to us. Shame comes into our life, and we don't want God to look at us. We create distance. Then listen to these words. Tell me, you whom my soul loves, where you pastor your flock. This is kind of what we are singing today. I want more of you, God. Have all that I am, all my mind, all my strength, all my emotions, all of me. Have me. Tell me whom my soul loves. Where is the pasture? Where is the pasture? Where do you pasture your flock? Where you make it lie down at noon? For why should I be like one who veils herself beside the flocks of your companions? This is like weird language for us in the 21st century. But back then, it's hot, right? You're feeding animals, you're out there in the sun. It's kind of terrible. And so what she is saying is, I don't care what you're doing, but I want to be with you. Even in the heat of the day, tell me what you're doing. And this is what God is calling us to, that we would not care so much what he's doing, but that we are with him. And this is what he says to her. If you do not know, O most beautiful among women, follow in the tracks of the flock and pasture your young goats beside the shepherd's tents. Man, we have to move. Sorry. We're going to wrap up here soon. But here's what I want to tell you from this, is he just tells her, hey, come along. Recently, earlier this year, I was talking to a sister in our church, and she was telling me how she wants to grow in worship towards God. And I think that the Lord answered her prayer, perhaps not in the way that she thought, but he gave her this job where she takes care of kids that are not as emotionally or mentally developed as they could be. And she's begun to take care of them. And here's kind of what he tells her also is, pasture your young goats. Care after the people that are in front of you. Love them. Even the people that you think aren't really worth your time, that maybe are immature, or maybe you just don't like the messiness of animals or goats, or you don't want to be in people's drama and business. But he's saying, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is the family business. And a lot of times we want to encounter God in the big moments of worship on a Sunday, and that drives us the rest of the week. But God is waiting for, oftentimes our worship for God is not these big dramatic moments, but daily, even mundane moments of worship, of sacrifice to God. And worship is not just a song that we sing to God, but it's the laying of our life in love towards God. And oftentimes, what it means to grow in worship is not finding greater and greater crescendos on a Sunday, but day by day laying our life down for others, just as Christ has laid his life down for us. Then he says, I compare you, my love, to Amar among Pharaoh's chariots. Your cheeks are lovely with ornaments, your neck with strings of jewels. We will make for you ornaments of gold and studded with silver. Here's what I want to tell you. That God knows the beginning from the end. And he sees what you will be in 1,000 years standing before his throne. And today he speaks to you the way that he would when you are going to stand before him. And God sees the beginning from the end. And so he has a vision of who you are. And he talks to you the way that you are in all of eternity, not the way that you are today. Isn't that amazing? And she says, while the king was on his couch, my nard gave forth its fragrance. We don't have a lot of time to go into that, so we might skip that, but there's a fragrance that your life gives off. Okay, we have to. My beloved is to me a sachet of myrrh that lies between my breasts. You remember the story of Mary? Remember the story of Mary and Martha, and about how she poured the alabaster oil on the feet of Jesus, right? And what kind of oil, what was it? It was myrrh, right? And so it speaks of this sacrifice, the sacrificial worship towards God. And myrrh is what you anoint somebody before their burial. Do you know that? And so it says that she has put that on her chest. And so what it's speaking of is it's symbolizing the cross of Jesus. And she's putting that on her chest, and she's meditating on his love for her. And she's thinking about what Christ has done, and she's thinking about, she's obviously not thinking about that, but this is a picture of Jesus' love for us, and we are putting that on our heart. Like today we're saying, set your seal of love upon my heart. And this is what she's doing. She is meditating on the cross. I want to tell us, is our discipleship, does it look like meditating on the cross of Christ? How often do you think of what Jesus has done for you? How often? Let's go on. Behold, you are beautiful, my love. Behold, you are beautiful. Your eyes are doves. Talking about how she only has affection for him. Then in chapter 2, she says this amazing thing. I am a rose of Sharon, a lily of the valley. This is crazy. She goes from being, I'm dark but lovely, and now she says this confident statement, I'm a rose of Sharon, a lily of the valley. She goes from doubting and self-condemnation and self-judgment, and she goes to boldly proclaim that she is loved by God. And she stands in her identity. And after she's received affection from her bridegroom, after she's received love for him, and he's told her that at the depth of your identity, at the core of who you are, is somebody that only has affection for me, though it may be immature, though it may be weak, at the core of who you are a lover of me. And when she hears his affection towards her, she is confident in who she says, no longer whispering, but boldly saying, this is who I am. I am loved by God. I am loved by my bridegroom. I am a rose of Sharon. And she is confident in this. Verse 4 of chapter 2, let him lead me to the banquet hall, and let his banner over me be love. Strengthen me with raisins, refresh me with apples, for I am faint with love. Here's the amazing thing. He leads her to a banquet hall, to a wedding hall. And his love for her is not hidden, but he puts a banner over her and lets everybody know that he loves her. Do you know that no matter what you've done today, no matter what you've done in the past, that God's love for you is not under question. God's love for you is not hidden. He's not shy to post you on Instagram, but he puts a banner over you that is love. and he brings a little farmer girl that, I think he loves me. I think I'm dark, but I think he says that I'm lovely. And he takes this girl, the shepherd girl, and he brings her to a banquet hall. And he doesn't just put her in the corner, but he places her in a seat of honor and says, this is the love of my soul. And so many of us, we have no problem with knowing that Jesus is in our heart right now, and that Jesus is also sitting at the right hand of the Father, right? That he's in heaven. But we have a big problem with the fact that we are on earth right here, right now. But the Bible also says that right now, currently, this is a spiritual and very real reality, that we are seated with Christ in heavenly places. And God has put you, he has seated you. Though you might not deserve it, though you might not feel like you're worthy of it, he has seated you with him. And this is what she tells him, I am faint with love. I don't know if you've ever been faint with love, if you've ever been lovesick, but the feeling is you just want to be with that person. And so as I wrap up today, listen to what Jesus said in Matthew 9:15. Jesus answered, how can the guests of the bridegroom mourn while he is with them? The time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them, then they will fast. I've been talking to many of you, and you guys are like, I can't wait for the Lent season. I want to go on another fast. And it's because God's longing, God is drawing us to him, and the longing of our heart is this response of, I want my bridegroom to come back, and I want to fast, and I don't even want food because I am awaiting his return. And listen to what he says in Matthew 26:29. I tell you, this is Jesus speaking, I tell you, I will not drink from this fruit of the vine from now on until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. He's also awaiting the day when we will sit in his banquet hall. We will sit with him and have a wedding feast called the wedding supper of the Lamb in Revelation. And Jesus is awaiting, and we as his bride are awaiting our wedding day when we will be together, one with God. When we will rule and reign with him, when we will finally see face to face the lover of our soul. And so today, we're gonna take communion right now. I want you to remember the lover of your soul, his broken body for you and his blood poured out for you. And I want you to hunger for him as he hungers for you. And I want you to await his return. And remember his sacrifice for you. This is the blood he poured out for you is a dowry for your wedding day. That God has already paid the price. He's already paid the price for you to be his bride. Let's stand together.